Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be reviewing the book We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach. I picked this book up at Target. I was just browsing the aisles and I saw the cover and I thought that it looked really interesting and not like anything I had ever seen before, and so I decided to pick it up and read the inside jacket, and I was really intrigued by the sort of black comedy-esque, fatalistic description, because the basic premise of this book is that there are these four teenagers, because it's told by four different people, and they all fall into different social groups in their high school. They're all high schoolers, and they find out that this asteroid, Arter, is basically on a collision course with Earth, and that everybody's going to be dead in eight weeks, I think it is. Yeah, it's 8 weeks. And so it's sort of about how they shed their different social groups and end up sort of coming together. And at one point, one of the characters, Andy, calls them, the four characters, his cuirass. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's from the Cat's Cradle by Vonnegut. And honestly, I think that there are some interesting connections between the Cat's Cradle and this book. I think that this is sort of like it could be a little bit of like a YA modern retelling, because it sort of is along, I mean, it's not along similar lines, but I feel like they could be categorized together a little bit. What I really, really loved about this book above everything else is that the characters were incredibly well developed. Especially for a YA book, I felt like there was a lot of depth to all of them. And it's told there are 8 sections for sort of the 8 weeks. It doesn't really pan out that each one is a different week. But within each of those 8 sections, every single one of the 4 characters tells a part of the story. So there are 4 separate stories in each, or 4 separate perspectives in each chapter, I guess the sections or chapters, I don't know. But the 4 characters, Andy, Peter, Anita, and Eliza, and so they all tell sort of their perspective of that same time frame. So like they're all happening at once, and sometimes they are in the same place and sometimes they are not. And it just, when I was first introduced to some of the characters, I sort of was like, oh, this guy's probably going to get on my nerves, or oh, this girl's probably not going to be my favorite. But all of the characters throughout the book evolve in different ways, and they all have very realistic faults, and it just, I thought that the depth of character was so fantastic. We find out in the first section that Eliza and Peter have a little bit of a past, because Peter is the all-American jock. Eliza was at one point sort of just like the shy photography student. And let me just tell you, when they describe the darkroom and her experience with the darkroom and the feelings that she gets of being in a darkroom, all I could think was, this guy has got to have at some point been a photography student or have been in a darkroom, because it was perfectly described, and reading it brought me back to college and spending nights until 3 a.m. in the darkroom developing pictures and having no idea what time of day it was, and just sort of like the magic that is darkrooms. That I just absolutely loved, and I couldn't not mention that. He just has a really great way with description. And so back to the point of the different characters. So Peter, all-American jock. Eliza is sort of like the shy kid, and then something happens between her and Peter's girlfriend basically bullies her and makes the entire school think she's a slut, and she ends up sort of, becoming what everybody says she is, and so she lets it change her. And then we have Anita, who's like the, my parents expect too much of me, I'm that straight edge, perfect grades, student council president, all of that, who wishes that she could do her own thing. And then you have Andy, who's like the slacker kid, skater kid, who is sort of you can tell from the get-go that he has potential, but that he's sort of stuck because of his friends group. And so, those are their different categories that they fall into in the beginning. But throughout the book, they sort of shed them and they cross over, and you find out sort of the things that each of them wishes that they had done differently. And it was a really great picture of what it was like to be a teenager and to figure out, who you are, and to be stuck in a group that you probably didn't choose. And it was really interesting. I thought that was well done. One of the things, so the asteroid, basically. I was so, when they first found out about the asteroid, I thought, they're just going to assume that it's going to hit the Earth, whatever. No. At one point, the president actually calls a press conference and is like, hey, United States, this asteroid that we thought was going to miss us is actually on a collision course, and everybody's going to be dead in 8 weeks. I'm sorry. If you're the president of the United States, or, Queen of England, or any of those, your important person with authority, why would you tell everybody in your nation that they're going to be dead in 8 weeks, so basically their actions have no consequences? Because even people who have, are more morally likely to do right over wrong are probably going to do some things they wouldn't normally do, because in 8 weeks it's not going to matter. And that's sort of what happens. You see what happens to a society when they think they have no consequences. And I could see it really happening. It was realistic, and the timeline was realistic, and it just made me think, I remember when I read The Cat's Cradle, I remember saying, I don't want to be one of the ones left when the world ends, because I would hate it. There's nothing about that sounds appealing to me, like being one of the survivors. And that's how I sort of felt in this, is that, I don't want to live in a world where people burn buildings down just because they have no consequences, nobody's going to arrest them, or, where there's a curfew and you have to stand in line for hours to get food, things like that. This reiterates again, I don't want to be one of the people who's left if the world ends. And it just, I think it did a really good job, and I think that it's definitely a book that will make you think about not only how we categorize people, how we treat other people, about our relationships to other people, but also about the decisions that we would make if we knew we were going to die in 8 weeks, or, what would happen if that were to happen. There was a lot in this that made me think, and I really appreciated it, and I think that this was very, very, very well written. So I'm really glad that I, basically impulse bought this at Target, and yeah, I think that it is something that most people would enjoy. There's definitely probably triggers for suicide and depression, and there's definitely triggers for sexual assault in it. So if those things bother you, they're very minor. The suicide one is mentioned a couple of times. It's never outright, nothing happens, it's just alluded to several times. But the sexual assault one is a little terrifying. So those are definitely triggers if you have triggers. But yeah, I think that this is a really great, thought-provoking and well-written book, and I can't say enough about how wonderful the depth of character was in it. So those are my thoughts on We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach. I would love to hear your thoughts if you read it, or your comments on any of the themes that it had. I feel like even without reading the book, that this is a great opportunity for discussion about some of those topics. And if you're going to pick it up, let me know. I'd love to hear what you think when you do read it. So I will see you guys next time. Bye!